Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. I'm Dr. Amy, and this week's episode is called The Lucky Egg, Truly Understanding Your Body and the Fertility Patient Mindset. And I'm so delighted to welcome back my colleague, Dr. Lucky Sekhon, whose new book just came out and is already helping people feel more informed and confident as they navigate their fertility journey. Dr. Lucky is a double board certified reproductive endocrinologist, infertility expert, and the author of The Lucky Egg. Her book grew out of her own IVF experience and from years of listening to thousands of patients who simply wanted straightforward, supportive information. Welcome, Lucky. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me back.
Lucky, you spend so much time educating patients during your first visit with them, just like me. But what changes when someone truly understands the biology behind their fertility? Where do you see the most surprise reactions?
I will meet a patient wherever they're at in their journey. And if they know nothing, I'm like, this is the best place to be. And I'm going to start from scratch. And we're going to teach you everything you need to know about how your body works and what it takes to get pregnant. And then if we run out of time when we need more time, we'll do another appointment. It doesn't matter. I'm curious to see if you've had a similar experience. I can tell immediately from the body language when a patient walks into the room. If they have read my blog, they know me from social media, they've watched my videos, they are coming in with a completely different demeanor than the person that was referred by their OBGYN and has no idea. They are way more nervous usually. They're usually coming in looking more apprehensive, not sure what I'm going to tell them. So I think just by virtue of familiarity, it kind of takes people's guards down. And anyone who's studied for a board exam knows this. If you feel at ease, you're going to learn better. You're going to be able to absorb the material better. And you're really learning so much in that first visit. So I think the people that come in not only having read stuff, but who are familiar with their doctor and familiar with the material that's going to be discussed are coming in at a huge advantage that they can really process the information differently. They've already laid the foundation. You can go from having a conversation that's elevated to much more complex and nuanced versus starting from scratch. But I do think that it is ideal for you to not wait to find out these basics when you're struggling or stressed because you've been trying and it hasn't happened or because you've had multiple miscarriages, right? I think that it's always better to just lay the foundation before it's even relevant or something that's stressful to you. And I say that as someone who went through a series of failed cycles, a canceled cycle, or 2 eggs retrieved that didn't turn into an embryo. That was still difficult for me at times, but it was made so much easier because I was an expert and knew all of the ins and outs. And I'm not suggesting everyone needs to become an REI, but I think if you have some basic knowledge, anything that comes your way is going to feel less stressful. And you're going to be able to make calm, clear-headed decisions. It's like going down a freeway and having the difference of a GPS that tells you when there's going to be forks in the road and when you need to go on the right and actually merge lanes versus just looking ahead at the signs and then trying to make quick decisions while you're going at breakneck speed. I think that that's a good analogy because you're always going to make calmer, more informed decisions if you have the roadmap. And there is every reason to educate yourself so that it's not just you blindly trusting whoever's in front of you. You know, the experts are great, but I think that you really need to partner with the experts and be a partner in your care. And part of that is really arming yourself with the best information because you don't know what you don't know. And I think that it can feel really overwhelming, like there's 50 different treatment options when it's really not that complicated.
Do you find your patients are using ChatGPT more to educate themselves before they come in?
Yes, or even in stressful moments, I've educated them, but the in-between moments, like the in-between when they last saw me for their last scan a few days ago, and then they're checking in for the embryo transfer, and they'll say, I had a moment of panic and I was asking ChatGPT about the grading. And I would say, well, you have my email, just email me, or
Right.
call us and we'll tell you, because ChatGPT gets it wrong a lot. I think people really put too much faith. They think AI is so smart. But I've done this many times as an illustrative example. It will make up resources for things. It's not something that you can really trust.
So you also write about fertility being a mix of reproductive biology and luck. How should patients who've experienced multiple difficult cycles approach the process emotionally and mentally? What is your advice for them?
I think that we have to surrender ourselves to the idea that we cannot control things in this situation, right? And whatever you can control, those are the things that we focus on. But you have to admit that there are things that we can't test for. There are things that we can't predict. I'm sure you say this all the time. This is like such a catchphrase, but here are the stats, but we won't know until you actually go through it and we'll see how things pan out. And I think that
Mhm.
that's something people really struggle with, the unknowns and trying to grasp at things that will make you feel like you have an anchor and that you're more in control. And I think that if you go into it mentally prepared, that that is a huge aspect of all of this. And that while stats are great and I can check your AMH and I can do your egg count, there is no direct way to test your egg quality. That test does not exist. And so there are multiple blind spots. And I talk a lot about luck and some of the things that we don't know, because I think that that really helps to restore trust between doctors and patients, patients and their doctors, because we can't act like we know it all. You know, we don't. And we have to help our patients mentally prepare for those moments where there are those big unknowns. I think no one talks enough about how excruciating it is after the egg retrieval, waiting that week for those updates, right? So, whatever we can do to mentally prepare people for those moments and give them practical advice on how to get through those moments, that's what's going to help them avoid the 2 a.m. Reddit rabbit hole or the ChatGPT
Right.
sending them in the wrong direction. I think it's about really just admitting the things that we don't know and the blind spots and saying, okay, these are going to be the more challenging moments, because it's like I'm on the edge of my seat, let alone the patient, wondering how are their eggs performing in the lab. And I think when you start admitting that and accepting that and normalizing that, it makes it easier for people to go through those pockets of time. And I also think that it's a message of hope. It's not a message to say, "Oh my gosh, this whole situation is completely out of our control. I'm the expert and I don't even know what's happening." Because I think that's how sometimes people might think that message could be interpreted. But I've only ever gotten positive feedback when I tell patients, even in your late 30s and your 40s, even when there could be in your mid 40s an overwhelmingly high number of eggs, a high proportion of eggs that could ovulate and result in an unhealthy embryo, there are still normal eggs that can result in a healthy
Mhm.
embryo. I mean, you were telling me that you've had a patient who got pregnant on their own with a healthy child at 47, right? So it is possible. Now, do we want to sugarcoat things and give people false hope? No, we have to talk about the stats, but know that anything is possible. We've all heard the story, and I've had multiple patients and have heard of other people where they had failure after failure when it came to their transfers, maybe even had difficulty with a surrogate being successful with a transfer, and then somehow miraculously got pregnant on their own, right? All it takes is one lucky egg. And that's why I named my book what I
Yes.
did, because I just want people to have every reason to say, listen, anything can happen. And in those in between cycles, if it makes sense and you talk to your doctor, it does make sense sometimes to try, because you just never know.
Yeah.
And something about IVF, especially when it's not going well and someone's going in each cycle after cycle, those are cycles where a lot of times, unless you convert it to an IUI, right? If you change course, where a person's not really able to even try in that moment. And sometimes science is great and can get you very far, but sometimes just harnessing the power of what your body can do will get you there. And it doesn't make any sense. And there's no scientific explanation as to why, other than it's a random lottery.
Yeah, I always say sometimes when two people love each other, miracles can happen. So you just never
Mhm.
know when you're going to see that miracle. And then often it's the husbands or the male partner that says things to me like, well, I'm a numbers guy. I want to know the numbers. I'm really
Mhm.
into the numbers. And it's like, I can give you like what the numbers are, but still, that doesn't mean that you have more control over them.
And this is where understanding the fundamentals, I think, really goes a long way, because when I tell people, okay, you're a numbers guy, well, remember I told you about the recruitment of the limited number of eggs? That's a limited sample size. It's not necessarily going to
Right.
translate into the large scale data that I'm presenting. It could be, that's why some rounds are better than others, because you have a better set of eggs in that random cohort that were recruited. And there's not always oh, okay, we know that you took this supplement, so that's why you had the better cycle. That is kind of a magical way of thinking, and it doesn't really capture the complexity and nuance of our biology.
So there's something, well, there's many things about your book that I love, but I love the Fertility Goddess Lifestyle. And I
Yes.
want to know more about what does that look like? How does it help patients let go of perfectionism? So talk to us about that.
Yeah. So the title was kind of a joke leading into the intro for that chapter, because I alluded to, we've all seen the perfectly curated Instagram profile of the influencer in front of the ring light, like talking about how she eats clean and she's doing this and she's got her 10,000 steps a day and she's like not using any plastics, and it just feels very much like this curated fantasy versus what is day-to-day life for the normal average person. And so that's why I named it that chapter, because that was kind of what I led with in the chapter. But if you read it, it's actually the opposite of the tone that a lot of this type of advice can take, which can make you feel very overwhelmed. It's very prescriptive. It's very formulaic. Like, you need to do this, you need to do that, or, you don't want to touch any receipts because that's bad for your fertility. There's, chemicals. And I think that we have to be a little bit kinder to ourselves and to each other. I remember even as an OBGYN in early pregnancy, like family members being like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you had a soda." Like, "Oh my God, you're pregnant. Like, you should know better." There's this like culture of shame and blame, and like making the person who's trying to get pregnant or who's already pregnant feel like they have to live in a bubble. And that's the messaging society has given us. And only recently is it like acceptable now for pregnant women to exercise regularly in pregnancy. But I remember even when I was pregnant, my very old fashioned parents were like, "You need to not be going to all these exercise classes." And I was like, "Guys, I'm an OBGYN," right? So the book really aims to make people feel calmer, and it presents the science and the actual data saying, these are the things that are associated with better outcomes, whether you're trying on your own or whether people studied women going through IVF for treatment. And it's very easy and maybe not sexy. I think a lot of times people that are giving out this advice online, they want it to be sexy and feel novel, like, "Oh my gosh, I have this, like, I'm in the know and have all this information that no one else is telling you." And also, I think that they're trying to cater to the consumer. And most people give out the message that they just want to be told what to do because it feels overwhelming. Just tell me what to do. If you tell me to drink a green juice every day, that's what I'm going to do. And I think there is an element of that, but it is something that backfires when you give too much prescriptive advice and it's very rigid and it's not really based on anything. It burns people out. And you and I know that that's a major contributor to people not getting to their happy ending, their desired outcome. A lot of times it's because they just can't stick with it. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but a huge part of it is psychological. And it's also sending kind of this backhanded message of, well, why are you dealing with infertility in the first place? Or why are you having miscarriages in the first place? Maybe it's because you were doing all those things. And you and I both know that that's not true. And so that's why I really want to shift away from this culture of needing to be so restrictive and to feel like everything you're doing could hurt your chances, because it's not actually rooted in biology and truth. And it's making people feel really negatively about themselves. And it's already a hard enough journey.
There's so much shame and self-blame that goes into the psychology of a fertility patient. So it takes a lot of work to lift that off of the patient. So I'm so glad that you wrote that chapter so people can read it and let go of that perfectionism. You also remind readers that success is not about perfection. How do you help people develop a fertility mindset that allows them to stay hopeful, grounded, and open to different paths forward?
Yeah, I think it's a constant reevaluation. I try to tell my patients that compartmentalization is their friend, because it can feel like a lot of times people will want to try to lay out a path like, well, what if the transfer fails? And then what if that next one fails? And what if this then happens? And I understand wanting to do that because it makes you feel this illusion of control. But I'm a very optimistic person, and this isn't like toxic positivity, but I think that there has to be a balance between wanting to lay out a roadmap and plans 10 steps ahead, but also being able to try to maintain some positivity and hope, because I think that can help fuel you and help you kind of get through the day to day of everything that's expected of you. So I think it's about striking a balance between realism and hope, and really visualizing what it is that you want for yourself in the future, no matter how far away that feels, and really focusing on like the baby steps in front of you and constantly reevaluating at each of those time points and saying, all right, let's look back at what just happened and how does that inform our decision making moving forward so that we're not just barreling ahead without being thoughtful. So I think compartmentalization is my greatest advice, because when you think of like IVF, breaking it up into two parts can make it feel way less overwhelming. Let's focus on making the embryos. Okay, now we have the embryos. Let's focus on the next step, right? And of course, you want to be efficient. So I'm always kind of thinking 10 steps ahead. But I think for the patient, that mentality is best reserved for a few conversations. And I think if you're really going to hyper focus on things, really focus on like the baby steps.
Yeah. I mean, when I plan to transfer a patient, I'm always, just like you said, 10 steps ahead. I'm thinking if this transfer didn't work, what would I do differently? And I sometimes even present it to the patient so they can hear that up front so that if they want to choose that path, they can. For example, let's say a patient has one embryo that's really strong and one that isn't so strong. Well, maybe presenting to them up front, because that's when people get angry, when they wish someone had
Yes.
presented them things up front before a failed transfer. So it sounds like we're thinking about things the same. So, for listeners who want to learn more, get a copy of your book, or follow along with your work, where can they find you?
I'm on Instagram at lucky.sekhon, Sekhon. I have a website by the same name, theluckyegg.com. I've had it for now 5+ years. And that's a really great resource because it has more long form content. Aside from what I do on social media, it's got blogs, but then also there are tools. I have an egg freezing calculator tool. I have an embryo morphology grading tool that will sort your embryos by their grade. And it's using actual data. And I have, the study there for people to access to see where is this information actually coming from. And just a lot of really practical things that I think can help make the journey a little bit easier. And then my book is available everywhere internationally. And I think it's a really great guide, not only for the people that are in the trenches of infertility with maybe more complex cases, but it's really the book that helps someone understand what is the biological clock and what do I really need to know and what does my cycle mean and what are the things I need to be thinking about as I prepare for the future and everything in between. There's really something for everyone. And it's very inclusive to all family building journeys. We're seeing a lot more solo parents by choice and same-sex couples, and all of that is represented. There's a chapter for each of those types of journeys.
Lucky, thank you for coming back and for sharing your wisdom. Your book offers such clear, compassionate guidance, and I'm so thrilled people can learn from you in this new way. All the links to what we covered today will be in the show notes. Be sure to subscribe to the Egg Whisperer Show on YouTube and Spotify. And remember to keep going with hope in your heart and a little sparkle in your step as you move forward on your fertility journey.